What if Hitler got assassinated? Adolf Hitler was the dictator, or Führer of Germany from 1933 to 1945. In his time he would destroy the Weimar Republic and replace it with the German Reich, also known as Third Reich. He would breach the terms of the Treaty of Versailles by remilitarizing, including the demilitarized zone in the Rhine. Hitler then expanded Germany by annexing the Saarland, Austria, Sudetenland, and then Czechia. In 1939 Germany invaded Poland, which would start the Second World War. It would last until 1945 and would be, with 55 million casualties, the bloodiest conflict in human history and would lead to the Cold War and world order as we know it. In his time as Führer, Hitler faced his fair share of assassination attempts at around 44, which makes him the person who survived the third most assassination attempts, only behind Zogu I of Albania and Fidel Castro. He survived all of these assassination attempts, but ended up killing himself. But what if that didn't happen? What if Hitler got assassinated? I split this video in two. In the first timeline, the Oster conspiracy succeeds, and in the other, Operation Valkyrie is successful. In this timeline, the Munich Conference between Adolf Hitler, Benito Mussolini, Neville Chamberlain, and Edouard Daladier fails. It was expected to end in disaster, because for one, Hitler wanted it to fail as a pretext to invade Czechoslovakia, and for another, nobody believed that the United Kingdom and France would abandon their ally. However, the world was proven wrong when an agreement was in fact signed in which Germany gets the Sudetenland if they promise not to invade the rest of Czechoslovakia. In this timeline, the Munich Conference fails and Germany declares war on Czechoslovakia. France and the United Kingdom declare war on Germany. Soon after the war begun, forces loyal to Hans Oster under the leadership of Hans-Jürgen von Blumenthal stormed the Reich Chancellery. A clash between the resistance and loyalists ensues, but the resistance, which was more prepared, won out, and Adolf Hitler would either get arrested or assassinated. Hans Oster would become the new president of Germany while Helmuth Grosskreutz becomes chancellor. Oster would immediately order German troops to withdraw back to their starting position, and a peace agreement is signed with the UK, France, and Czechoslovakia to return the status quo ante bellum. As for Germany itself, the monarchy would be restored with Prince Wilhelm of Prussia, who is the grandson of former Emperor Wilhelm II, as its emperor, as Wilhelm III. In the German Empire, Nazism would be stamped out. With that, the most influential fascist nation would be gone, and in Europe, Italy and Spain would remain alone. Italy would still go to war with Greece, but this ends horribly as they are kicked out of Albania. In the end, Greece annexes northern Epirus and the Deccan, while Albania regains independence. With Mussolini's popularity collapsing, the opposition sees their chance, and a civil war breaks out between fascists and anti-fascists consisting of monarchists, republicans, liberals, militarists, socialists, and hardline Catholic. Italy hoped that Spain would help them out, but with Spain just having finished their own civil war, they are in no position to help. In 1943, the fascists are defeated, and it is the liberals and monarchists who manage to secure the country, and a constitutional monarchy rules over Italy with King Vittorio Veneto III and Prime Minister Elsa de Gasperi on charge. In this chaos, South Tyrol held a referendum to join Germany, and Istria and Sara broke of Italy and joined Yugoslavia. To make things worse, Libya and Ethiopia declared independence, with Ethiopia taking Eritrea and the United Kingdom ceasing Somalia, meaning that outside of Trentino, Italy lost all gains it made ever since 1871. With that, Spain under Franco is the only fascist country in Europe left. Meanwhile, the Empire of Japan never invades French Indochina, and thus the West never sanctions and antagonizes Japan. Japan would continue to fight China until 1947, when they finally culpace. Mengjiang would be extended to Sichuan and Ningxia, while Tibet annexed Qinghai and western Sichuan. The rest becomes the Republic of China under Chen Gongbo. However, the warlords residing over Shanxi, Gansu, Sichuan, Yunnan, and Guangxi get to come the ruling over their lands. Meanwhile, Tianjin, Shandong, Greater Shanghai, Ningbo, Taizhou, Wenzhou, Fuzhou, Guangzhou, Xiamen, Guangzhou, and Hainan are annexed by Japan, crippling China's naval and maritime capabilities. Japan, Manchukuo, Mengjiang, and China would then form the Greater East Asian Co-Prosperity Sphere. In this timeline, World War II never happens, and the United States remain isolationist and never become the global power. In 1952, Democrat Adlai Stevenson II defeats Republican Robert A. Taft, and then in 1956 John W. Bricker. In 1960, Richard M. Nixon defeats John F. Kennedy, and then he gets re-elected, winning against Lyndon B. Johnson. In 1964, the same year, he passes the Civil Rights Act. This causes the Democratic Party to stay the party of the South. In 1968, Republican Nelson Rockefeller and his running mate Gerald Ford lose to Democrat Ronald Reagan and his running mate Jimmy Carter. Yes, you heard me right, and Reagan wins again in 1972. In 1976, Jimmy Carter wins the election against Henry M. Jackson, but loses in 1980 to Jerry Brown, who then wins again in 1984. In 1988, Democrat Bob Dole is elected president, and in 1992 and 1996, Republican Bill Clinton. In 2000, Republican Al Gore defeats John McCain, and in 2004, he defeats Donald Trump. In 2008 and 2012, Democrat Mitt Romney defeats Republican Barack Obama and John Wolfe Jr. In 2016 and 2020, Republican Hillary Clinton wins the election against Democrats Ted Cruz and Bill Weld. In this timeline, the Democratic and Republican Party are essentially switched, with the Republicans being liberal and Democrats being conservative. In 1945, Germany develops its own nuke, followed by the UK, France, Soviet Union and Japan, and a Cold War begins to emerge between the liberal democracies of France and UK on one side, dictatorships of the proletariat of the Soviet Union on one side, and militaristic monarchies of Germany and Japan on the other. In April 1955, Hans Oster dies and Henning von Treschow succeeds him, and he rules over Germany until 1974, when he too died. After him, Ulrich de Maizière takes charge, and under him Germany would begin to liberalize. In 1988, 50 years after the Oster coup, the first German elections are held and Helmut Kohl becomes first prime minister. However, this Germany is less democratic than in our own timeline, with the Kaiser still holding some power, the legislative being much weaker, and the army still holding a lot of influence. Decolonization would still happen, but it would be much slower, with the Europeans fighting on, which could lead to an even messier independence. Japan would support nationalist and the Soviet socialists' independence movements. Maybe a Vietnam War may happen between Japan and France. Meanwhile, with Jews accounting to significantly less than in OTL, Israel may never get formed, and with that the Suez Crisis may also never happen. This would cause Nasser to never become as influential as he got, and Arab socialism may never spread to Libya, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, etc. In the 90s, Japan would start to decline, and a massive Chinese independence war would start, and the Soviets would join directly. In the end, Mongolia annexes Mengjiang, and the Soviets puppet Manchukuo and Korea and annex the Kuril Islands and South Sakhalin. The rest of China gains independence as a republic, with its first president being Li Tonghui. Japan would after this return to a period of isolationism, while China would begin rebuilding itself. They aren't nearly as powerful as in our own timeline. The Cold War would develop from a three-way Cold War to a two-way Cold War between the capitalist West and socialist East. In the Soviet Union, after Stalin dies, Malenkov takes over. After his death in 1988, Gennady Yanayev becomes general secretary until 2010, followed by Viktor Tilkin. In this timeline, Germany would be a far more powerful state than it is today, tough, less democratic. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union still exists, and China and the US aren't as powerful as in OTL. In this timeline, the July 20th plot succeeds, and the bomb that was placed there kills Hitler. The plotters then seize power in a military junta which contains, amongst others, Friedrich Ulbricht, Erwin von Witzleben, and Klaus von Stauffenberg rules over Germany. They would seek a conditional surrender, in which Germany keeps the territories it held by 1914, but the Allies demand unconditional surrender. With Operation Bagration, which ended on August 19, the Soviets were closing in, and the military government finally acknowledges reality and surrender on August 20. However, they only surrender to the Western Allies and send their forces to the east. By the time the Allies reached Berlin on September 20, Romania and Bulgaria just fell to the Soviets. But the war is over, and with the fall of Germany, the Soviets also take over Hungary, Slovakia, and Poland. But unlike our own timeline, all of Germany and Austria, and also Czechia and Albania, are under Western control. Czechoslovakia would be dissolved and is replaced with the Czech Republic and Slovak Socialist Republic. In the Pacific, the war would end a whole year earlier, but since American nukes didn't get dropped, Japan ultimately got partitioned into 4 zones with the Soviets in the north, but Korea is still divided into 2. In China, with the war being a year shorter and Operation Ichigo not happening, the Kuomintang managed to defeat the CCP with its leaders fleeing to the Soviet Union. In 1949, the occupation of Germany ends, but the Allies are uncomfortable in creating a big German state just after World War II, which doesn't just control West and East Germany, but also Pomerania and Silesia. But they also don't want to weaken Germany too much, as it is right on the border to the Soviets, and so the Roosevelt Plan and Morgenthau Plan are off the table. The Allies, however, do agree to follow the Churchill Plan by creating a North German and a South German state, although one without Hungary. The South, containing Baden-Württemberg, Bavaria and Austria, becomes the Danubian Federation with Otto von Habsburg as King of Austria and Emperor of Danubia. For Bavaria, Württemberg, and Baden, their royalties also rule over their own lands. The North, meanwhile, becomes the Federal Republic of Germany. Prussia is still dissolved and it's split into its administrative divisions. Its states are the Rhineland, Westphalia, Hesse, Thuringia, Lower Saxony, Saxony-Anhalt, Saxony, Silesia, Brandenburg, Pomerania, Mecklenburg, Schleswig-Holstein, and the city-states of Bremen, Hamburg, and Berlin. In its first election, Social Democrat Kurt Schumacher defeats Christian Democrat Konrad Adenauer. Overall, while the CDU won more elections than the SPD in our own timeline here without Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg, this is switched. Meanwhile, East Prussia becomes the Prussian Democratic Republic, which was solely created out of pettiness by the Soviets. In 1952, Turkey, Greece, but also Albania joined NATO. In 1950, the Korean War starts, but without a communist China helping the North, they end up losing the war and the islands is under full South Korean rule. The Vietnam War would also be won by the South thanks to China, and Laos and Cambodia also never become communist. In 1952, the British, American, and Chinese zones unite into Japan, which keeps its emperor, and the Soviet zone becomes the People's Republic of Japan. In 1968, the Bratislava Spring happens, which would however lead to the Warsaw Pact invasion of Slovakia. In 1889, the Warsaw Pact still collapses, and in 1990, East Prussia would join Germany as its newest Bundesland as part of the 2+4 treaty. Nowadays, East Prussia is the poorest province of Germany. On the countryside, the alternative for Germany usually wins, while the left are popular in Königsberg, but both parties usually don't get past the 5% threshold and only get in if they win in 3 or more counties, until this too was abolished in 2023. In 1999, Poland, Slovakia, and Hungary joined NATO, followed by Slovenia, Bulgaria, Romania, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia in 2004, Croatia in 2009. Montenegro in 2017, North Macedonia in 2020, and Finland and Sweden in 2023. In 1952, the XC would be formed by Belgium, Danubia, France, Germany, Italy, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands, and it would grow to become the European Union as we know it, with Albania being potentially already a member. Japan wouldn't reunify, and the North would end up developing nukes. In this timeline, Germany would be divided north-south rather than west-east, and remains divided as such. Overall, communism would be much weaker, as parts of Europe that were socialists remain capitalist, and outside of North Japan, communism is non-existent in East Asia. Nowadays, only North Japan and Cuba are communist. In both of these timelines, less bloodshed would happen, but depending on whether Hitler is killed before or during World War II, Germany would either become stronger or more. If you liked the episode, leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe. Goodbye.